Welcome back to Monster Tamer, a 2D Pokemon-like RPG created Phaser 3. Previously, we looked at some additional tools that we can use while developing our game to make our developer experience better. We took a look at TweakPaint and how we could use this library to build GUIs for interacting with our game, and we looked at how we could use some of the built-in functionality of Phaser to allow us to move game objects by using our mouse events. If you missed the previous videos, there'll be links in the video description to the source code up to this point, as well as the complete source code for this video. There'll also be a link to the previous videos if you'd like to catch up. So let's get started. Alright, so now we wrapped up our tools part 1 section of our series. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to start working on our saving and loading. And so currently we have some simple mechanism to save some data, and so this is really our options scene and our data manager. And currently we can select options in our options menu, persist that to our local storage, and then we can use those settings throughout our game. We're going to look to go ahead and extend this functionality to our world scene and start to persist information about our player. And so we'll start storing things like our player's position, which direction they're facing, the monsters in their party, and then later on we'll extend this to like our inventory. When our monsters take damage, we'll persist that data. And we'll really start building a robust save system so that we can make our full game. So to see a quick demo of what we're going to be building, what we're going to do is in our world scene, we're going to go ahead and add functionality to listen for our keyboard event for the enter key. And when this is pressed, we're going to go ahead and open up our new menu. And from our menu, this is where we'll start to build out options for our game, like saving data, showing our options, showing information about the player, the monster's party, etc. And so what we're going to focus on for now is just adding our save option and our exit option. And from our menu, when we click save, we're going to show some information to the player that, hey, we're saving your game. And then what will happen is from our title scene, we're going to go ahead and allow the player to go ahead and click continue. And it's going to pick up that data that we saved. So now you'll see our players in a different position. Just to see something a little more drastic, let's just go up here. We'll hit save and we'll go ahead and refresh. And now if we come back to continue, we pick right back up where we were. And we'll also be looking at how we can go ahead and reset our game state. And so we select new game, we'll reset our player's data back to the initial positions. Alright, so go ahead and get started with our code. What we're going to do is let's come back to our code and let's jump over to our preload scene. And what we're going to do is we're just going to jump right into our world scene. So it'll just speed up our development. And what we're going to do is let's go ahead and open up our world scene. And what we're going to do is first we're going to listen for input for when the enter key is pressed, and we're just going to go ahead and console log some of that information. And so this is going to be new functionality. So let's go ahead and open up our controls class. And inside here, what we'll do is let's come to our constructor, and we're going to add a new key that we're going to listen for. So what we'll do is let's make a new property, and we're just going to call this enter key. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy my type real quick. And for our type, this is actually going to be a phaser, and it's going to be input keyboard key, and we'll also have undefined just in case our plugin's not defined. And then what we'll do is down our constructor, we're going to go ahead and we'll add in our new property. So we'll do our enter key is going to be equal to our scene, our input plugin, our keyboard plugin, and then we're going to call add key. And so this is just going to be a string representation of our key code. And so what we're going to do phaser.input.keyboard.keycodes, and we will go ahead and do enter. So then what we'll do is we need to go ahead and add a new method for checking if this is pressed. So we're going to do something like what we do with our space key. So we're just going to copy this. I will go ahead and paste it. We're just going to do was enter key pressed. And then we just want to change from our cursor keys to our enter key. Alright, so with our new functionality in our controls class, let's jump back to our world scene and we'll come down to our update method where we listen for player input. And what we're going to go ahead and do is after we check to see if our space key is pressed, we're going to go ahead and check to see if our enter key was pressed. We'll do this, controls that was enter key pressed. And if it was pressed, we're just going to go ahead and console log just to make sure this is working. Enter key pressed. All right, what we'll do is come back to our web browser and we'll make sure our developer console is open. If we press the enter key, we should see our console log. All right, so now we have our input logic working. What we need to do is actually build out our menu. And so let's go ahead and come into our code under source world. We're going to go ahead and add a new subfolder. We're going to call this menu. And under menu, we're going to go ahead and add menu.js. And let's go ahead and export out a new class. We'll do export class menu. And so for our menu, we'll need our phaser scene. So let's go ahead and add in our constructor. And what we'll do is I'm just going to pop open into our dialog UI. Let's just copy some of our properties here. So we'll have our scene. We'll add that above our constructor. We'll come down to our constructor and let's just copy this part here. Go ahead and just replace that. And what we'll do is let's get rid of width. And then real quick, what we'll do is let's go ahead and just copy our import. And we'll bring it to the top of our file. All right, so before we dive into our code, let's go ahead and just review what we're building. All right, so for our menu, what we're going to end up doing is we're going to use a phaser graphics game object. And so we worked with the graphics game objects before when we did our scene transitions, but now we'll be taking a look at some of the other methods that are available to us. And so for our graphics, what we're going to do is we're going to construct a rectangle. And basically your graphics game object, this is just a very simple game object that kind of wraps the Canvas API methods. And so we can do things like define our fill style, our line style, our stroke when we want to fill in a shape. And then we can do things like fill in a rectangle, fill in circles, and basic shapes like that. And so the graphics game object is really nice if you want to go ahead and draw using the raw APIs itself. Besides that, we'll also be using container to keep all of our menu elements together. And then we'll also be using our image for our cursor, and then just some simple text game objects for our menu options. So at a high level, that's how we're going to go ahead and construct our menu. And then we'll also go ahead and add in logic for handling a player input so we can move our cursor, listen for when the space key is pressed so we know if an option was selected. All right, so now we reviewed how we want to go ahead and build our menu. What we'll do is we're going to need to define some properties for our class. And so our main thing is we're going to need to know how wide our menu is going to be, how big it, how high it will be, and then we're also going to need to know the padding for how much we want for our border. And so just to make this stuff a little bit easier to track, we're going to go ahead and add those as properties on our class. And so what we'll do in our constructor is we're going to do this, our padding, and we're going to set it equal to 4. And then we'll do this, we will do our width, and we're going to set this to 300. And then what I'm going to go ahead and do is we're just going to add these properties to our class real quick. So we're going to have padding, width, and then we will have height. And then for these are just going to be numbers. So I'm just going to copy this real quick and we'll just update our type. And let's go ahead and paste that a few times. All right, and so for our height, we're going to want this to be dynamic based on how many items are in our current menu. So as an example, right now our menu is this big because we have the save and exit options versus if I had like 6 options, so like a bag and options, player info, then we want our menu to be a lot bigger so we can show all those options. And so we're going to want this to be dynamic based on what we have in here. For the time being, what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and hard code this to a value. And then once we come back and add in our items, we'll go ahead and make it dynamic. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and add a to-do. So we'll do calculate height based on currently available options. I'm going to do a to-do, and then what we'll do is we're just going to do this. We'll set our height, and we're going to set it equal to 10 plus. We're going to do our padding. We're going to times it by 2, and then we're just going to go ahead and add in 50 pixels so we have our initial height. All right, so the next what we'll need is we'll need to go ahead and create our graphics game object, and then we'll need a container to keep all of our game objects together. So we'll just add some properties. We're going to do this.graphics is going to be equal, and we're going to set this to a new method. So we'll do create graphics, and then we'll go ahead and do this. Our container is going to be equal to this, our scene.add.container, and we're just going to do 0, 0. And for our children, we'll have our graphics game object to start with. And then real quick, let's go ahead and add those as properties. So I'm just going to copy this, go ahead and paste it twice. And so we're going to have graphics, and we're going to have container, and this will be a game objects dot graphics, and this will be game objects dot container. And let's define our new method real quick. So we'll have our private method. And for now, what we'll do is we're just going to return this, our scene.add.graphics. All right, so before we start updating our create graphics method, what we need to do is we just need to add a few more public methods to our class. And so for our menu, we're going to need a way to go ahead and show and hide it, depending if our enter key was pressed. And so we'll need 2 public methods for that. And so we're going to need a private property to know if it's currently visible. And so to go ahead and do this, let's go ahead and add a new property to our class, and we're just going to call this isVisible. And for our type, this is just going to be a Boolean. Then what we'll do in our constructor is we're going to go ahead and set this to false by default. And so we're going to do this is visible. We'll set equal to false. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add a getter for this property. So we'll do get is visible. And what we'll do is we're going to return this is visible. And our type will be a Boolean for what we return. And then we'll need to go ahead and add our two public methods. So we're going to have show and we're going to have hide. And so for our show method, basically what we want to do is we're going to want to go ahead and update our container's alpha. And on the hide, we'll also go ahead and set the alpha to 0. And we'll also update our isVisible property. And so what we're going to do, we're going to do this, our container, we'll call set alpha. And we're going to set it to 1 when we show. And we'll do this is visible. We're going to set that equal to true. And then we're going to go ahead and copy and paste those. And let's just do 0. And then what we'll do is go ahead and set this equal to false. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and start updating our create graphics method. So then that way we can actually see our menu in our game. So what we'll do is instead of returning our graphics game object, we're just going to do const g. And then we're going to go ahead and return g at the end of our method. And so inside here, this is where we'll go ahead and start drawing out our menu. And so to do this, we'll need to reference our graphics game object. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use fill style. And basically what fill style is going to allow us to do is this is how we can define the color that's going to fill in whatever we draw. And so for this, we're going to need a color, and then we need to go ahead and know the alpha, and that'll be optional. And so for our color, what we're going to do is do 0x, 3245, or C, and we'll go ahead and be explicit. We'll set our alpha to 1. And then what we need to do is we need to define what we want to draw. And so we're going to say fill rectangle. And what this will do is allow us to define our X and Y position and then the width and height of our rectangle. And this will allow us to go ahead and fill that shape onto our graphics game object. And so for this, what we're going to want to do is we're going to do 1, 0. So we're going to use our container's main position to control where our rectangle is. And then we're just going to move it over just a smidge so that because we have our padding. And so then we have our X and Y for the top corner of our container. Then we need to define the width and the height. And so this is where we're going to go ahead and use our width and our height of our class for our menu. We're going to subtract 1, so then that way we have that border. And then we'll do this dot height, and we'll also subtract 1. Then what we want to go ahead and do is we want to go ahead and define our line style. And so this is going to give us a border around our rectangle. And so we'll do g.line style. And for our line style, what we want to do is define the line width. And so we're going to do 8 for our width of our menu, for our border of our menu. And then we can do our color. And so for our color, we'll do 0x, 6D, 9, AA8. And we'll go ahead and say for our alpha, we'll go ahead and do 1. And then after we define the line style to actually draw that border on our rectangle, we have to use the stroke rectangle method. And so we'll do G, we'll do stroke rectangle. And then now we need to go ahead and define our starting position and then the width of the rectangle and the height. And so we're going to do 0, 0. And then we're going to do this, our width of our menu, and we'll do this and our height of our menu. Finally, we're just going to go ahead and modify the alpha of our whole graphics game object just so it's a little bit see-through, a little bit opaque. And so we'll do G set alpha, and we're just going to do 0.9. What I'm going to do is just going to space these out a little bit, and we'll go ahead and save. All right, so go ahead and actually test our changes. What we need to do is come back to our world scene. And first, we need to go ahead and create an instance of our menu. So let's come to the top of our class. We'll add a new property to keep track of this, and we're just going to call this menu. And then for our type, we will have menu, and then we need to go ahead and create an instance of this. So let's come down to our create method at the very bottom. After we create our dialog UI, we'll create our menu. We'll do this, our menu equals new menu, and we'll pass in this scene. Now what we can do is we'll come back down to where we listen for our enter key. And what we're going to do is when our enter key is pressed, we're going to first check to see if our menu is visible. And so we're going to do this, our menu.isVisible. If it is visible, we're going to go ahead and hide it and return early. So we're going to do this menu.hide, and we'll return Otherwise, if our menu is not visible, we want to go ahead and show it. So we're going to do this, our menu, and we'll call show. All right, so if we go ahead and save, we should be able to come over to our web browser to test. And so if we press the enter key, we should see our console log statement, but nothing shows up on our game. And so what's happening is we're rendering out our menu, but we're rendering it out at position 0, 0. So it's over here in the top left-hand corner of our world. And where we actually want to position it is we want to position it relative to our current camera view. And so what we really want to do is we want to position it based on what our camera can actually see. And so to add this logic, what we need to do is in our menu, we need to go ahead and add in logic when we call our show method. And so to go ahead and do this, we need to go ahead and reference the properties on our camera's worldview. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a console log real quick, and we're going to do this, our scene. We'll reference our camera's manager. We'll go ahead and grab our main camera, and we're just going to console log out the worldview object. And so if we come back to our scene, if we press enter, we'll see now in our console, we now have an object with a bunch of properties on it. So the worldview property is basically an object that gives you all of the details of where the camera is focused at in your game. And so what's currently visible based on what we've defined for our camera. And so what this object does is it gives you the starting X and Y position of a rectangle of where the camera is currently focused, and then gives you the width and the height of that view. And in addition to that, it also gives you information based on some of the properties of this rectangle here. And so like we have our right position, so how far over it is, the top, so how far down we are in our world scene, so we're at 984 pixels, and then likewise for bottom. And so based on these properties, what we can do is now we know where we're at in our world scene, and we can go ahead and position our menu according to this. And so to see an example, if I go ahead and move just a little bit and we hit our enter key again, we should now have our properties, but we see some of them have updated because our view in our world has changed. And so now with these properties, we can go ahead and position our container in our game. And so what we need to do is define our X and Y where we want to position this. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do const, and we're going to go ahead and grab the right and the top properties from our object. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this. All right, so with our right and top properties, what that's going to give us is it's going to give us our Y value, so how far down in our scene we want to go ahead and start, and it's going to give us our right position, so how far over this current position is. And so we need to take these two properties and transform them into a coordinate, like over here in the corner, for where we're going to start our container. And so to do that, we're going to make two new variables to keep track of this. So we're going to do start X, and we'll do const start Y. And for our variables, what we want to do for our X position, we need to take our right value, and so it's going to give us all the way over here, and we need to subtract our width of our menu plus our padding, so we have a little bit of spacing. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do minus this, our padding, we're going to multiply it by 2, and then we're going to go ahead and minus our width of our menu. For our Y value, we need to take our top value and then add to it to give us some padding. And so what we're going to do is we'll do top plus this padding, and we'll go ahead and multiply it by 2. And then what we need to do with our new values is we just need to update our container's position. So we'll do container set position, and we'll do our start X and our start Y. So now if we come back to our scene, if we press our enter key, what should happen is now we should see our graphics game object show up in our scene. And we can see now it's near the edge of our game, and we have that little bit of padding. And if we hit the enter key again, it disappears. All right, so one last thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and clean up our console log. All right, so one last thing we want to do is we're going to want to add some safeguards to when we show our menu. So let's come back to our world scene. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and enhance for when our player interacts with our scene. We're just going to add a check to make sure that our menu is not actually visible. So we'll do and not this menu is visible. Then we want to go ahead and allow the player to interact with the objects in our game. And then when the enter key is pressed, what we also want to do is we want to make sure that our dialog menu is not visible. And then that way they have to finish their dialogue before they can open up the menu. And so we're going to say this. And so what we'll do is we'll do if this dialog UI is visible, Then we're going to go ahead and just return early so we don't open our menu. All right, so one other thing we're going to do is we're going to add in functionality. So if we press the back key, we can go ahead and close our menu as well. And then that way we don't have to press just the enter key. And so to do this, below here, we're just going to do if our menu is visible, we're just going to add a to-do. We'll do to-do, handle, input for menu. And then for the time being, what we're going to do is do if this controls was back key pressed. And if our back key was pressed, we're going to do this, our menu, and we're going to do hide. All right, so go ahead and test this. If we come to our scene, if we press our enter key, and then we press the shift key to go back, we should close our menu. All right, with that actually brings it into this video. In our next video, we're going to continue working on our world scene and our menu, and we're going to go ahead and add in our options for saving our game. So as a reminder, there's a link in the description of the video to the complete source code for this video. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the content. If you did enjoy the video, please consider liking the video and hitting the bell icon to be notified when the next video in the series is released. For more great Phaser 3 content, please see the links on your screen now.